from our usual values, but I'm so happy to see new faces, new people. It's the first time we see that this had in Net-a-Porter youth, or youth Net-a-Porter. And I'm one of the organizers of the meetup. I started 2 years ago, and my co-organizer Ryan is ill. He calls uncold, so he apologizes. And we have started this community, this meetup, to look beyond basics of Agile, beyond practices and processes, to talk about how to run companies better. What is leadership in this context? We are about 2 years old, and we are always running games and talks. Tonight is mainly a talk, and I would like to introduce John.
Well, we're going to talk about Yuke's. Did you guys want to do a...
Okay, I think yes, let's do first an intro.
I think that's fair. This is a great location, so...
Exactly. I have mentioned it's our first time here, and a lot of thanks for the team who have helped organize it, Shadi and Courtney and all the rest of the team members. And we will also have pizza at the end. And maybe a few words about...
Thank you. Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us. So just some housekeeping before we start. The toilets are behind you guys to the left, if you need them, and the emergency exits are also on your right. So if they're not up that way. As Natalie said, we're going to have some pizza around 7:45 or 8. We've got a lot of pizza coming, so stick around for that. I'm going to pass on to Shabir, who's going to explain a little bit about the company and tech, and we hope you enjoy your evening.
Thanks, Courtney. There's also a lot of drinks as well, so feel free to help yourself throughout the talk tonight. So my name is Shabir. I work here as a delivery manager. Just very quickly, a little bit about the company for those of you who aren't aware. So Youth Net-a-Porter Group was actually set up just last year. It's a merger between two online fashion companies. Youth is an Italian fashion company, and Net-a-Porter is a British fashion company, both doing online e-commerce, kind of luxury fashion and fashion-related stuff as well. We've got a really large technology team here. I'm really pleased to say we work in different forms of Agile. Each team is kind of, it's up to them to decide how they want to work. So we're really interested to hear John's talk tonight. I think there's a lot of stuff that we can also learn from it. I'm not sure, but we might have time for Q&A at the end as well. So that'd be really awesome to maybe hear some of the challenges that you guys are facing as well. Feel free to come and speak to any of us afterwards if you guys are curious about what we do, anything about the company, anything about how we work as a team. So we're really interested to hear about some of your experiences, and it'll be good for us to also share what we do as well, and just to learn from each other. So thank you very much. I'll hand it over to John now. Cool.
That's a short personal intro. I met John maybe first as a lead producer. I was trying out the tool on one team as an agile coach myself. We were doing Kanban, we were increasing visibility and so on. Then we met over online webinars. I think that the team does amazing webinars, very thought-leading topics, DevOps, innovation, product management topics. And then we met. John moved to Europe recently, and because the company is growing, they won really various awards as a very high-growth startup. They have won a lot of venture investment, and I found their story very interesting. I heard John speak at the Lean Kanban Day in London last year. I think a similar talk. And I said, okay, I will ask him to come to our meetup, talk about startup growth, and share his knowledge, his personal experience as a CEO, co-CEO, co-founder of what they went through and what they learned. So let's enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, can you guys hear me okay? This is very strange to be so far away from you. I'm going to feel compelled to walk up closer from time to time. So I am John Terry. I'm co-CEO of LeanKit. We're about a 150-person software company based in Nashville, Tennessee, although I am myself actually based in Wimbledon right now, helping to set up our European operations personally. We're about a 5-year-old company. And so, I'm one of the co-founders. There was a time when the company was 4 of us in my dining room in some office space that we were literally stealing from somebody's old boss. but we're a little bit past that these days. So I want to talk to you about, we've had many, many challenges, but I want to talk to you about some of the stuff we've done over kind of the last year and a half. So we took VC funding for the first time last year. So until then, we had been sort of organic growth / angel funded. And last year we raised VC money, and what you do with VC money is you spend it to grow more quickly. And so we like I said, we are about 150 people now. We were about 50 people then. And so we grew, relative to our size very, very quickly. And kind of where I'm talking about right now is, call it 5 months into raising money and hiring lots and lots of people. We had money, which always makes life a little bit easier. At least you're not going to run out of it. But we were having some problems. We had hired a lot of people, and in particular, we had hired a lot of really smart product development people. And those really smart product development people were doing a lot of this. I don't know if you guys ever watch nature documentaries where the elephant seals bang into each other on the beach. It's really loud and impressive. It's not very productive. So we were now spending a lot more money on our product development group and not getting a lot more out of it, not getting a lot of results, because we were having a lot of sort of disconnect and argument. And so we went through some exercises, which we gave, funny names like Trust Fall Symposiums and the Congress of the Sirs and Mans and the Petitfours Parade. We tried not to take it too serious. But we were really trying to get down to sort of, a raw place where people were honest about what was going on, and we could make some cultural changes to get things moving again. And what I want to talk about here is, the first part is some of the problems we were sort of owning up to, and then some of the things that we put in place as a group that have made things much more productive since then. So we really had to start off with some clearing the air where we executives admitted that a lot of the problems, while it was sort of manifesting as them running into each other and bellowing, a lot of the actual cause of that was us, things that we had done to make that situation happen. So we had made some promises, and you're not going to read that. Oh, actually it's the I usually preface that with small words, but it's not that. So we had been with some of these people. So some of these key leaders we had actually hired before the money came in, and so now they were leaders of teams that we hired with the money, but we'd actually brought them in before some of this money came in. And there was sort of a painful time where we were really trying to go very fast because we needed to get the money. And so, we were making, honestly, we were getting out ahead of our ability to deliver on promises. We were telling them that, just give us feature. We're going to do these architectural releases where we handle technical debt, we back up and deal with that later. And it didn't happen. We just needed to keep getting features out the door to sell the things. We had, for a while, been doing an onshore-offshore model of development, and that's something we don't actually do that anymore. All of our development's actually in the U.S. But this was sort of a relic of days when we were really quite poor, and we kept doing it. And what was especially bad was that we were starting to try to be much more disciplined with our onshore teams, but with our offshore teams, we weren't. We treated it like sort of two different sets of rules. And it made us, and in a lot of ways, we were hypocrites. And we put these rules in place, but we said these were the right things to do in terms of, how to do good code and all these sorts of things. But we didn't really enforce that for offshore because it made things go faster, and we could get features out, we could sell them. And so, we were genuinely hypocrites. They were warning us that, as we were going faster, it was sort of the wheels were sort of coming off the bus as we were driving, sort of a thing. Like when we had been smaller, we had done things pretty well, pretty good sort of technical standards. But we got medium-sized and we're trying to go fast to sort of get into this funding and start using it. We really let a lot of that slip, and they were telling us that we were doing that, and we were saying, yeah, you're right, and not actually doing anything about it. And I think one of the worst things that we were doing was we created teams, which we assigned sort of different goals to these teams, but the teams were insufficiently staffed, and so there was actually a lot of interdependencies between these groups, sort of hidden win, and they felt on the hook for results that they actually couldn't deliver. And so we really had to own up to, those were our mistakes. They weren't their mistakes. We also had to own up to the fact that, this is something that, I don't know, has anybody been in a sort of a startup at the beginning, raised money as part of the fundraising process? So even if you know that raising money is going to take longer than you think it is, it still actually takes longer than you think it's going to. So we were going for a long time, like 9 months on the check's going to come next month, right? Because this process takes a long time. It's nerve-wracking. My hair went right during that time. But anyway, so we had to keep moving because the only way we could get the money was act as if we had the money, sort of fake it until you make it. But we really put people in kind of a bad spot. We had also, and so, some of this is, for them, I was owning up to mistakes. Hopefully for you guys, I'm sort of pointing out bad things you could do as a technology leader. Like, don't do this, learn from my mistakes. We got into partnership conversations with the world's 2 biggest enterprise software companies at the same time, which was dumb. One of them was hard enough to manage, and in the end, by the way, neither one actually happened. But one of them actually had a pretty good chance of happening. It would have been very, very difficult to land, but we could have done it. But we tried to do 2, in part because we didn't like the one that we had the best chance of winning with. It made us uncomfortable. If you think of some of the biggest enterprise software companies, there's one that's now sort of a good guy. There's one that's still really a bad guy and can sell us. That's what I'm talking about. Didn't use a name. But we had put ourselves in a spot where we were stretching to hit these strategic goals. Strategic goals are big. If you hit them, you make a lot of money. But they don't actually pay the bills in the short term. And so we were doing a lot of work for maybe sort of home run swing, in an American baseball sense. Big mistake. We had failed to provide role clarity at the leadership level. So I am one of 4 co-founders. We are co-workers from a previous job. We have known each other now for 15 years. We've been to each other's baby showers and weddings and all this kind of thing. And so, when we first started the company, everybody's a CX something. It's not like real, it's just pretend so you can put it in a business card. And later on, you do assume sort of real responsibilities, but it's pretty small, and you're just friends, and so it doesn't really matter, or you don't think it does. And everybody you work with kind of knows how things work. But as you get bigger, things that were vague, things that we left almost intentionally vague, because it made us uncomfortable for one of us to, hey, I'm the boss now. We're going to work like I'm your boss. If it's okay, after work, school is drinking beer, but I'm your boss during the day. We couldn't do that. We had a hard time doing that. So we left a lot of people in this weird, I don't know who's in charge of what kind of situation, which really made things difficult. The other thing, and this is, some of these may or may not apply in any given case, but this is one that I really would suggest pretty much applies in any kind of technology company, in any kind of company. Our people didn't understand our business model. And if you don't understand the company's business model, it's really hard to make decisions about the future, architectural decisions. If you don't know how fast the company expects to grow, then how do you know how to scale the infrastructure? So to use, sort of a very tangible thing in our particular case, we had some people, some of our architects who, it's like, well, I'm joining a high-growth startup. So it's like, that's like Facebook, right? So we have to be able to scale like hugely. So I've got to build the shiniest architecture you ever saw in the world, because otherwise it's going to blow up and be 1 billion users. We're probably only going to have 1 billion users. We're making very good money, and our VCs are happy if we are doubling users every year. So over the course of 4 years, we're going to have 8 times as many users. That's really strong results. That's not the Facebook scale. So on the one hand, basically what they were seeing, what they were expecting was B2C sort of meteoric user growth, not enterprise sale sort of linear growth. They also didn't understand that we are a subscription SaaS company. So we sell every month, right? And so it's monthly recurring revenue. If I don't make a sale this month, not only did I miss it this month, I missed it all the future months for whatever I can expect from a churn perspective. And so in their minds, they were seeing huge growth that we've got to do lots of stuff to get ready for, but they can take a long time building it, because once we do, we can go up really, really fast. And that's not the way our model is going to work. And so we needed them to understand that, so this is, sort of numbers stripped off. But what this is sort of, we had a target growth line with our VCs that, sort of imagine it as revenue or users over a year. So end of 2014, end of 2015, 16, 17. So, towards the end of 15, when we were getting into these challenges, we were sort of, like 100,000 off on our MRR. Which they're like, it's 100,000, but that doesn't matter. Well, actually, though, if you sort of project that out into the future, it's 800,000. But it's really not 800,000. The truth is, it's cumulative lost revenue, which means you lost all the money under that curve by having a slower growth rate. We also, because we're growing fast, in order to maintain even though we make plenty of money, still to stay ahead of our growth, we're going to have to keep raising money. So when you are raising money, your trajectory of revenue, one, if it's not good enough, you just can't raise money. End of story. But also, if it's lower than what it should be, it's both how much you can raise, how much you're worth, is how much you're making and how fast you're growing. Those two things mean that you can be, the money can be much more expensive for just a little bit less growth further out. So, in a catastrophic case, you can't raise funds. And, we're still growing, and that probably means that the growth plateaus. Except that in software, market share gain, usually growth doesn't plateau. If you stop going up, you start going down, because other people can spend ahead of you. And so the risk is really not just a sort of stagnation, the risk is of things going downward. And to really simplify, so I have a sort of old understanding of the financial model. To really simplify it is, if you are hitting your target, you have lots of money to swing and miss sometimes building cool stuff. If you are missing your targets, you're stuck in the world of the sales team saying, give me that, somebody else has that. And it's not very interesting or exciting, it's basically me too stuff. So this is something that they really didn't understand, and because they didn't understand, they were making a lot of bad decisions. So I would, if I can give you sort of one piece of advice is help your development teams, your technology teams, really all of your teams, understand how your business operates. They will be smarter. So, you might say that was sort of clearing the air in education. The next thing we talked about with them was we wanted to work with them to make the organization work more effectively. You know, we wanted to self-organize in a lot of ways. We wanted to delegate a lot of authority to them to do things the way they thought was right based on their circumstances. But we needed them to understand that certain things were our values and those were non-negotiable. And I've heard people say, well, but John, that means you're dictating, right? So that should be emergent from a team about what they think is valued. No. You know, at the end of the day, the people who are writing the checks have biases, they have viewpoints, they can either admit to that or not. And if they don't, and they can say, oh yeah, you guys just self-organize towards whatever you think is right, until it goes wrong, and then they say, well, that's not what I believe in, and that's not right. So we didn't think that that was right or fair, and we're actually also, that's not just implicit for us. For us, we are a lean company, it's in the name. And so these values are not just sort of hidden biases, they're what we are as a company. So the first thing that we needed to understand was we are a lean company. That's not something we market and sell, that's who we are. So we started the company because we believed in lean. We were lean people. My past career is in the logistics business for healthcare. So I learned lean moving materials and stuff. We built the software because we really believe in this stuff. So these lean ideas were absolutely non-negotiable. This is how we're going to operate. If you don't like it, there's the door, basically. So some of the things here that that potentially were could have been problematic. So lean believes very strongly in the idea of respect for people, but it also actually believes very strongly in the idea of leadership. And so in a lot of the world, Agile, people will behave as if management, it's like the Communist Manifesto, that in the future world, Agile happiness management will wither away and won't need it anymore because self-organizing teams will just manage themselves. No, that's crap. Leadership is real, leadership is important, it can be done really badly, but to run a company effectively, you genuinely need strong leadership. You need people who are in charge, and they're willing to be in charge. All kinds of things in here, but lean was not negotiable for us. Kanban was not negotiable. We build the software, we're going to use the software, we're going to use the methodology across everything we do. We use this for software development, operations, marketing, sales, finance, ordering beef jerky, you name it, that we do visual management and really really believe in it. We passionately talk about this stuff all the time. We train people on it all the time. And if people if that wasn't who you are, I don't know, if you were a dyed-in-the-wool waterfall person or a Scrum person, you probably wouldn't fit in our company. One of the things that was actually most difficult was an idea that to sort of come to terms with for some people, because it really boiled down a lot of the other ideas to something very tangible. So we have an idea at Lean Kit called FISGOOD, which is an acronym for frequent, small, good, and decoupled. And at the simplest level, you would call this sort of a story slicing heuristic. That these are the characteristics of a well-sliced small story. But it's actually how we organize teams. It's how we do things in marketing. It's something that's really important for us. And so this was something that created a lot of tension because actually the funny, the story I'm telling you right now is about our product group, which you might say came to terms with this and actually is now operating very effectively here in this. I just had a value stream mapping exercise with our marketing team, talking about a lot of these things. And the idea of doing things good enough for marketing people, for designers, for visual people, for writers, was horrifying. That might be fine for code, John. You can't design artists. And you know, I joke now about this, but really the developers were the same way. You know, what they heard was technical debt. What they heard is put out garbage and, you know, all these kinds of things. And it's not what we meant. And actually, you know, when we originally came up, so we came up with the acronym for FizGood based on research about what we were doing in our company, and we came up with the visual metaphor of the soda can, you know, the FizGood kind of thing. Later on, we realized, well, it was a funny visual metaphor. It wasn't necessarily encompassing everything that we needed people to understand about this. And one of the most important things about this goes back to understanding the business model. So, frequent, small, good, decoupled, all of those things we believe are really necessary to do good work. There's a balance there. All of those things have to be in place. They interlock. Sometimes they compete with one another. But they're not necessarily equally important, depending on what business you're in. If you're in the business of medical devices, then good is the most important thing for you, right? Because of what you're telling people. If you are in the business of, you do a lot of partnerships where they have to rely on your API in a way which is sort of the backside that's visible to them, then decoupled, doing things in a way that's radically decoupled can be really, really important. So in our case, though, because we are a SaaS software company, frequency of delivery is the most important thing for us. It's the overarching concern out of all of these things. We're in the repeat customer business. SaaS software customers don't buy the product that you have now. They buy the product that they believe you will have in the future based on your track record of releasing things. So if you're releasing things constantly, it will give you a lot of leeway. They can see where you're going and they believe it. But if you don't, if it's inconsistent, if it's infrequent, then they give up on you. They tune out in a radio station metaphor. So we really needed people to understand that some of our architects, you know, were in the mindset, well, good, that's so important, that's the most important thing. Good is really important, good is not the most important thing. Frequency is the most important thing for us, for our type of business. So, you know, frequency was the overriding concern, the point of the exercise. One of the other things we realized, and so this was an interesting thing, our developer, our architects were passionate believers in the idea that if we were going to do high quality work, we needed to be consistent about it, and so we needed to have layered teams, a front-end team, a middle-tier team, an API team, a database team, that kind of thing. Because only that way could you ensure that the front end is consistent across everything you do. Could you ensure that the database side is consistent across everything you do. What we needed to make them understand was that, great, that would make things very, very good. It would also make things very, very slow. So we were going to deliver, and inconsistent in their delivery, unpredictable delivery. And so they needed, if frequency is crucially important, we couldn't do that. We needed to have decoupled teams, feature teams, cross-functional feature teams, in order to deliver frequently good enough. And good enough was one of the really important ideas that we worked on with them. And that's so when people heard good, when they heard quality, different people heard different things in that word. It meant different things to them. So to our marketing and salespeople, and QA and all these kinds of people, good means maintainability, sustainability, the ability to keep the thing running. And they're both right. There's a balancing act here, thus the radio tower metaphor here, that, you know, those two sides are going to pull on things, and, you know, they have to be kept in balance. The customer might think he wants just the marketability things, but eventually the tower is going to fall over and fall on. That would be sad. So you really have to keep things in balance, and, you know, again, sort of to think about that metaphor, you would not want a radio tower that was wildly swinging back and forth. It's going to oscillate some. You know, it's not fixed in stone, but it needs to be small oscillations. So there's basically a continuous balance in play there. And what that meant was that ultimately ultimately, if frequency was the objective, if being decoupled was something we essentially needed to do as a structural thing, as an organizational thing, and goodness was going to be this continuous balance, this continuous tension between these two factors, what that meant was that the single thing that the teams really had in their power, the biggest lever that they had to make this whole thing work, was making things small. That was the one thing that they could do consistently all the time to make the whole sort of edifice stay up. So getting things smaller was crucial. That was really the thing we had to get way better at and have. Part of being able to do that, so is to find some level of goodness that is not a judgment call. It's sort of it's a base level, so that other things are going to be a balancing act between maintainability and marketability. But you need to have some level of sustainability, quality. That sort of you just do it. Everything above that is a judgment call. For us, we came up with the idea of TLDR. Those of you guys who are text messengers too long didn't read, which is most people's documentation on quality and standards. So we tried to make one that was really small. So for us, basically, what we came around with the idea was for something to be good enough to go out the door, it needs to at least have testing in place. I don't mean manual testing, I mean test harness. It has to have test automation in place at some level. It has to have at least some degree of logging, at least some degree of documentation, and it has to have had some degree of review. It may not have to have had all of those things all the way that you would want them to begin with, but if you don't have some level of each one of those four things, it's very hard to get better in the future, right? It's very hard to retroactively put in place all the testing you would want if you don't have some base framework. It's very hard to improve that if you don't have the logging to understand what the problems are, et cetera, et cetera. So for us, in essence, there really is a minimum level of quality that you're really trying to say. It's not that you want to do bad work, but you need to say, this is the stuff that must be done. Other things above that are a trade-off between that marketability and sustainability. The other thing we needed them to understand was that so this was sort of in contrast to the folks who thought we were going to go to Facebook scale. There were also, we had people who still were like, I long for the good old days of being a startup, where everything was handcrafted and we just sort of did things ourselves. Have you guys ever heard of the DevOps idea of pets versus cattle? So this is the modern version of what in Lean we call Jidoka, or automation. And it's the idea that you can really only do things at scale if you focus human quality efforts on outliers, not standard problems. And thus, you need to automate and standardize to a very high degree in order to be able to scale effectively. And so the pets versus cattle reference here is this. So you guys, anytime we build a new product or we do a startup, right, we have like one server, maybe two, maybe it's under somebody's desk, and we give it a funny name like Darth Vader, and then the next server is called Death Star, and the next server is called Han Solo, and the Jar Jar throwing a gate, and that kind of thing. We have individual hardware, individual infrastructure, each one of which is configured very differently because we set it up at a different time. And we configured it differently for good and valid reasons, and we know how that works. And so when there's a problem, we go in and we try to carefully care for that problem and get things back to the way it is, because it's different. It's a unique, precious snowflake, unlike all the other servers. So, like your pet, right? So I love my dog. Literally right now we've got a problem where my dog has a heart murmur. I love that. So my dog gets an ultrasound. My dog gets expensive medicines and all those kinds of things. Because I really love my dog and I want my dog to get healthy. I grew up around a farm family. We did in fact have a few pet cows that we kept by the house that had names. There was like the blind cow that we would always go out and bring salt next to. But most of the cows don't have names. Most of the cows have ear tags. And from the farmer's perspective, they're functionally identical. And yeah, there's people whose job it is to take care of the cows, you know, to shoot the coyotes if the coyotes come near and just to herd the cows, and to give them medicine if you can. But the moment that that cow is sick enough where it's going to get the rest of the herd sick, you take the same gun that you used to shoot the coyote and you shoot the cow. And you drag the cow away and you buy more. Because you don't love the cow. The cow is a way to get meat. Because you're in the meat business, not the love business. And so if you're doing business at scale, or if you're doing technology business at scale, you've got to move away from handcrafted servers and infrastructure and services that we lovingly try to fix when there's problems. We need to move to a model where when there's a problem, we blow it away, we spin up another one based on automated configuration, and it's back up and running, and who cares? What was the problem? I don't care, go back. The only way that we can get to that kind of model is to put in place a way for people to really fix problems when they arise. And so in the world of lean, we talk about the idea of end on, or stop the line. And this is the idea that everybody in the organization has the right and responsibility when they see a problem to pull the cord and stop everything in order to fix the problem. Now, when they do that, it might or might not be an actual problem. And so you have to come around and huddle around and figure, is this a real problem, or do we genuinely have to fix it? But the benefit of the doubt is giving the employee that they have the right, we want them to stop and fix problems. And when we fix problems, we don't want to just fix the problem. We want to find the underlying problem and fix that so that this problem can never occur. We're not in the business of inspecting to find defects and fix defects. We're in the business of inspecting our process in order to fix the process and to ensure that it can't generate any more defects in the future. So these were things that we basically said were non-negotiable. This is how we were going to run our business. And if you don't like this sort of framework, this lean framework, these Kanban ideas, then we'll help you find another job. But you're just not going to fit. And I know that sounds bad. Genuinely, we didn't. There's a few people who did end up leaving later, but we were not trying to chase large numbers of people out of the building. We just wanted to be honest with them. So those were the things that were non-negotiable, but everything else that I'm going to show you are things that we came up with a group, because in essence this was the group's ideas for if we were going to do those things, how were we going to run the company? How were they going to run? In essence, we had put out the guardrails, but we needed them to actually run the organization, and these are some of the things that we came up with to help us do that more effectively. And I should really hasten that. Some of these things you go, well, I've heard that before. You didn't get that. Don't think it. So the first of the things we started doing was, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, we had previously had sort of layer teams, and what we moved to after the team sort of took on board those values, and we did a value stream mapping exercise, and we sort of looked at all of our challenges, and in the end, the team themselves, the leadership team, came to the realization that if frequency of delivery really was the overarching thing, then we needed to move to delivery squads as opposed to these functional layer teams. And so we moved to what you would recognize as the Spotify model, where you have a matrix where you've got squads which are cross-functional, and then guilds which represent the skills or functions. So this was the squads we had at the time. So the vertical slices are the delivery squads. Each one of those is cross-functional. Those are the people who sit together, they work together. They're meant to have 80% of the skills that they need in the squad to get. They're meant to have the skills in their squad that allow them to do 80% of their work without reference to other squads. So they're sort of functionally independent most of the time. The cross-cutting things are the guilds, and that's how you do hiring, that's how you do training, that's how you maintain consistency of approach and technology and all those kinds of things. So both of those things are important, but for us, the vertical slice, that's the critical thing. That's where people sit, and that's where people live. And what that meant for us is we ended up with two different org charts, basically. A critical thing about the org chart that took some getting used to for people was, so that you know, there's a box at the top of each of these things, which is in essence the name of the squad, but it's not the name of the person, because the squad actually has multiple leaders. So we have, you might say at the probably the base level, each squad at least has 2 peer leaders: the product manager and the technical leader. So the product manager is in charge of what and why we're doing things, and the technical manager is responsible for how and who is doing those things. Those things have to be in balance, in our view, for a team to work effectively. But we also, one of the key things here was the idea that, so using group as an example, within the group squad, the developers report to Jim Coward, but the QA person and the automation engineer do not report to him. They are in essence peers at that level of Jim may say it's done, but he may think it's done, but only Janila can actually say it's done from a QA perspective. He has no ability to ram through a result. And so, you know, basically those top line people within the squad had to get along, that they had to agree on things for things to work. One of the things that we did, it's been our, I say this with sort of no offense here, but you know, there's a lot of argument within the technology world of our open plans great because they facilitate collaboration and communication and all these kinds of things, or are developers more productive if you put them in individual offices where they can heads down and focus and everybody leaves them alone. From our perspective, that both of those things have merit, but both of those things are wrong. So in our viewpoint, an open collaborative space is only, so if I overhear things from my team, that's collaboration. If I overhear things from other people, it's just noise and irritation. But on the other hand, the productivity of individual developers is not what matters. What matters is the productivity of the team. Right? The team is the unit of measure, not the individual person. And so what we did is we did a build out within our company headquarters to create squad rooms. So basically we have rooms which are sized to fit our squads. Each squad has their own room with double French doors leading onto sort of central hallways where basically all the other squadrons, so if they want to, they can have them open, and they're collaborating with other squads. But if the squad wants quiet, they want to work together, they want to be left alone, they want to be heads down, they have the ability to close the door. And like I said, you know, if it's noise from outside the hall and other teams, it's noise. But when you overhear something that your QA person's talking about as a problem, it may not be your problem, but you know something about it, and that's valuable. And so we've seen huge benefit by creating these sort of cross-functional teams and co-locating them within these rooms. We actually do have a lot of distributed people. So this is not entirely physical co-location, but one of the neat things about creating squad rooms is it actually allowed us to bring our remote people in much more effectively. So the screens at the end of the room there, those have an HD camera and they're connected to, we use Zoom as our video conferencing system. We used to use Hangouts, but in the end it sucked. So we switched to Zoom. The really neat thing about having these rooms is those Zoom cameras can be on pretty much all the time. So the remote members of the team are essentially sitting in the room all the time, which you couldn't do in a big open space. And with individual desks, you wouldn't get the same collaboration with those team members. So we found this to be really productive, and the teams, it's really created team cohesion, and we now have all the teams have funny names, they've created their own posters, they have logos, they have theme songs, they have competitions. It's really cool. In order to manage this, we created 2 parallel sort of management structures for the department. One of them is comprised of the product managers and the technical managers of each squad. We used to have UX leads in there, but that's not true. We got too big. But basically, the product manager and the technical manager of each of the squads comes to this meeting, and it's, in essence, it's how we manage our roadmap. Because those are the two people who are most responsible for delivery of the roadmap within their squad. Those two people are there to represent their squad in the tribal council. So we meet, we have stand-ups twice a week where we sort of surface issues, and then we have a longer meeting at the end of the week where they resolve the issues that were surfaced in the earlier meetings. So a stand-up meeting is too short to actually solve any problems, and for cross-cutting concerns across teams, you usually don't have to solve them immediately. They're more like structural issues, and so this longer meeting is a very effective way to do that. The other thing that we created is what we call the architecture committee, and this is just the technical leads. The product managers aren't allowed. And so basically, in the previous meeting, it's the technical managers wearing their hat as deliverers of product. This is those same people wearing their hat as architects, as sort of keepers of quality in the system. And so they need to talk about technical standards. We have one of the squads that we created, I forgot to mention along the way. So we have the functional squads, feature delivery squad. We actually, one of those squads we call ADAT, which is automation and tooling. And basically their job is to do the initial work on any major new structural thing we're bringing in for the other teams. So they get those things started because sometimes those are bigger than you can do just along the way while building features. So this group as a group helps to decide on what that ADAT squad's roadmap is going to look like. The other thing that they do as a group is put together proposals for other work that's going to go on the roadmap that represents their collective judgment about what's important. So one of the big problems that we were having before this was, and I alluded to it, was we were hearing noise about problems. There was a lot of sort of describing of problems from technology leaders, but each one of them was describing their problem. Front-end problems, database problems, server problems, all those kinds of things. It's kind of noise. It basically came across as whining. And the simple fact is, while those things were important, we couldn't work on all of those things at once. And frankly, because it came across as whining, we worked on none of them. And that was bad. So what we did is, by putting them together in this group, part of their job as a group is to make recommendations for things that are going to go on the regular roadmap. And it basically represents their collective judgment about the most important architectural considerations that we need to invest in. So, in essence, the front-end guy has to sort of say, yeah, there's things I think are really, really important. But right now, if we have limited dollars, I agree the most important investment we need to make is in the platform and our automation. So I'm going to, in essence, put my support behind the director of platform and his recommendations. So they developed A3s, which is our tool for putting stuff on the roadmap. So one of the things we started doing was actually having a roadmap. So before that, we had been a startup, a lean startup, where you pivot continuously and just change which is sometimes code for change your mind all the time and be chaotic. And so we actually put a roadmap in place. And so on this, what this represents is each one of these rows is a squad. So one to many, and then each one of the vertical slices is a 6-week period, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. And basically what we said we were going to start doing was sort of have a rolling roadmap where whatever we had done in the last 6 weeks, we would be in rollout measurement. We're executing on our plan for this 6 weeks. Next 6 weeks, we have a product concept, an A3 document, and mock-ups. 2 weeks out, we have just the product concept document, the A3. Beyond that, we have a theme. So this is what we started having in order to have visibility across teams about where people were going so that they could do consistent planning between each other. One of the things we started getting into very, very heavily, this is something we had flirted with before, but we started getting into very heavily was using cost of delay as a way to do prioritization decisions. So for those who are not familiar with this idea, it's the idea of focusing less on return on investment. Because if you're in focusing less on the investment side and more on the return side. With the idea being that if you're in a high growth, high margin business, the investment side is actually pretty small relative to the return, so the return's what matters. And what matters much more than focusing on the investment is, because usually it's a run rate investment, your run rate teams, is the speed, the payback period. So how long it's going to take to get the return matters a lot more than the investment. So you're really focusing very heavily on the time value of money when you're making investment decisions and the cost of delay on it. For anybody who's very interested in digging into that, I would strongly, but actually, a starting point would be a blog called Black Swan Farming. Very good blog. After that, look for videos from Don Reinertsen. He's got some good hour-long videos out there. And after that, dig into his books. But that's sort of the baby steps way of getting into the idea of cost of delay. Because at the end of it, it's like Don's best book, Principles of Product Development. But it's kind of like an economics textbook for product development. It's awesome, but it's awesome in the biblical sense. So big and hard and worthy of awe. So one of the things we started doing was using A3s for product concepts. So this is hardly earth-shaking. An A3 in a lean world is literally an A3 sheet of paper, where the idea is you don't use more than an A3 sheet of paper, because anything more than that, nobody's going to read. It literally came from Taiichi Ono, who was one of the heads of Toyota back years and years ago, would only ever read the first page of any report. And then he would say, like, let's go see. And so, people learn to put all of the key information on a single page, because that way we would actually look at it. So A3 is designed to be a concept document, a problem statement, not a technical specification. There's not enough space for it to be a technical specification. So we do design comps as a sort of a theory of what we're going to build, but rather than doing a lot of specification beyond the design comp, we really feel that the critical thing is that the development team understands why we're doing this. What's the business value? What's the timing? Who are we trying to solve a problem for? What are the risks and those kinds of things? Because if they have that, if they have a comp, which is a concept, like, hey, this is the idea, and they understand the underlying why we would do this, they're much better equipped to figure out the right thing to do, sometimes which is easier and cheaper than if you had specified in great depth. So A3s are a big, big thing for us. Another thing that's really big for us is the idea of cadences. So this is going to sound a little crazy. So we're a Kanban company. We sell Kanban. We do continuous delivery. Literally, each one of these teams now is delivering many, many times a day. And so we're not supposed to like the idea of time boxes, right? That's Scrum people. They're bad, according to we Kanban people. Cadences and time boxes can be used for the wrong reasons, but they're actually very powerful if they're used for the right reasons and in the right way. So what we do is we're on a 6-week planning cadence, or a 6-week cadence, where basically there's 8 6-week periods in a year, which if you do the math, that's up to 48 to 52 weeks. But luckily, there's the holidays at the end of the year, so really it does work out to fundamentally 8 6-week working periods in a year. It's kind of nice that way. But we are aligned where we have aligned the entire company on this 6-week cadence, where twice a year on this 6-week cadence, everybody in our company comes to corporate headquarters. 4 times a year on this cadence, leaders come to corporate headquarters. 4 times a year, we've aligned our board meetings to this cadence. There's a huge value to predictability in an organization. It's not easy to get in place, but once you get a consistent cadence schedule in place, it makes everything else way easier, because you know where people are going to be. And if they tell you they're not going to be there, then you know that they're not telling the truth. One of the things we tried to do, and we failed in our first approach, was what we aimed for was we said, what we want you to do is 60% of your work needs to be towards the roadmap. We know that there's going to be a certain percentage, let's call it 20%, that loads and unplanned work that just sort of falls out of the sky. There's nothing we can do about it, you just have to handle it. But we want to leave you time to do work that you think is right that's not on the roadmap. We're going to call this stuff squad-driven work. So we want you to do 20%, 60%. It was a noble and miserable failure because the squad-driven work would always get put off to the end of this week, or they would start things and they would stop things. You know, it's timesheet management, you know, percent allocations. I should have known better. Wow. So what we switched to was another cadence. And there's cadences inside cadences inside cadences. So each one of these 6-week periods, we call them a sweep, a 6-week execution evaluation period. Each 6-week sweep, there's a week of planning and training and alignment, followed by a week of 3 out of 4 weeks they do squadron work during that week. The other 4th week they do hackathon work. And then the other 4 weeks they do A3 work. We can't predict when the 20% crap is going to fall from the sky. It comes when it comes. But basically what we were doing with this statement was we were saying people with WIP limitation, right? You're much more effective if you can focus on a thing and not try to intersperse that between other things. And it was a commitment. It was basically we're saying we are giving you after planning week, the first week is your week. Not the last week, not mixed throughout the week. The first week is your week to work on what you think is important because we really believe in that idea of giving them time to do things. I'm actually not going to, I'll sort of show you some of these slides, and I won't go through all the detail because there's a lot of detail. But basically, we have a standard schedule for every week in the 6 weeks. So there's basically a standard schedule for every week of the year, which sounds mildly like a beautiful mind and crazy talk, and maybe it is. And at first, it's very difficult. But once you get this in place, it's really powerful because nobody gets stuck saying, well, I can't be at that team meeting because I've got to be at this other meeting. Because the team meetings all happen at the same time. Everybody's at the team meeting at the same time. The travel time happens at the same time. You get this rhythm of life within the company where it's like, well, when's that going to happen? Oh, I know when it's going to happen. It always happens. Tuesday at 10 o'clock, that's when that happens. So having these standard schedules has been a huge factor in, basically what we found is by having certain things cadenced and very standard, it's allowed the rest of the time for the squads to be extremely unstructured and flow. Because they know when these things are happening, they can really know when they can develop and get heads down and become very, very productive. We have a standard template that we use for our squads when they do kickoff. And I think to remind you, this is not, other than the principles, this was not stuff we dictated. This is something that at first our sales team hated, absolutely glued to this idea, because couldn't we use that for roadmap work? But what we were trying to balance was we need stuff on the roadmap, but there's things at the team level, there's things even at the individual level that they know should be done, but we don't. We needed to give them time to do that. So some critical things that we required of them in squad-driven work time was it could be sustainability, it could be user experience improvements, it could be research. It had to be finishable though. They couldn't launch on big things that couldn't be finished in this time. It needed to be stuff that they could actually do within this allocated time. When I say do, though, that can be sort of two flavors of things, and we've definitely seen this. Some of it's low-hanging fruit. We've got some fantastic things out of the teams where we weren't asking them to do things, but they actually knew they were really easy and they were ticked off that we weren't asking them for it. And so by giving them time, they built features that were like, God, why didn't you ask for this? It took me like 3 hours to build this thing. And I've wanted to build it for 3 years. So that was one of the huge things that came out of it. The other huge thing that came out of it was the ability for the teams to proof and prototype bigger investments that they thought were wise, but we couldn't understand without a certain amount of research. And so by giving them the time to do that, we've gotten some really good proposals out of the team. We just kicked off a 2-squad, 2-sweep endeavor that was based on research that was done during squad-driven work, where basically 2 of the teams collaborated elaborated their quadrant of work to first put together a proof of concept and then put together a business case based on the proof of concept to do development work. So it was, we had been telling them, you should do this, you should put together a proof of concept, you should put together, but they didn't have time, right? It was like empty talk. You should do the right things, but I'm not going to give you do that on the weekend or your own time or something like that. So this has been hugely beneficial for us. So like I said, I'm not going to walk through all of these, but like I said, essentially we have a standard calendar for each one of those weeks. One of the interesting things you might know about that, though, is most of that time has no meetings. Most of it is just uninterrupted working time. By standardizing the meetings, that actually allows you to have much more uninterrupted time. In the interest of time, we did get started a little bit late, but I'm going to skip a little bit of this stuff. So one thing we did, we started doing was, you got to be careful what you're measuring. Anybody heard about the idea of vanity metrics? Metrics can drive really bad behavior. But one of the things that we started doing was, we didn't quite know how to measure results for product development. Right? It's a mushy thing, right? Everything's not the same size. It's not dollars. You don't have a consistent unit to measure. But we knew we needed to do some level of measurement beyond cycle time and those kinds of things. We certainly want to do that. But we put in place two countervailing measures to sort of influence what we thought were the most important. One of them is really not a measure. It's like the grossest grain measure you could ever do. So every Tuesday, we have demo day. Each one of the squads has time to stand up and do demo of whatever they got done in the last couple of weeks. This is not like a time box. We committed to getting this done. It's just, here's whatever we got done during that time. And again, there was no measurement of size, there was no measurement of scale, there was no unit measurement. We just said every squad is going to be allocated 5 minutes to do demo during this time in front of marketing and sales and all the other people. Which actually puts a lot of social pressure on people without actually having a unit measure. So people wanted to have something to show. They wanted to have something that people would applaud for and think was super cool. And so it really started shifting their behavior towards front-loading things within the suite that could actually be shown to people. The other thing that we started doing in the upper right-hand corner was initially, we didn't want to say you can only show things we're done, because we really weren't ready for that. But what we required was a color coding symbol of red, yellow, green. What green was, this is actually in production, versus red is stuff that's still in dev or not even certified by QA. So we didn't say it had to be green, we just said you had to tag things with red, yellow, or green. And again, people didn't want to not show green things, and so it urged them to do the right things. So one of the things we wanted to do was push delivery towards things that could be marketed, things that could be shown in sales. The other thing that we really wanted to push was that automation, that Jidoka and stop the line stuff. And so what we started measuring was deployments, just raw number of deployments. And basically with the goal to increase that as much as we possibly could, which people would say, well, but we can cheat this. We can break things up into more deployments and we'll get more. If I just break things smaller, and I'll do it. And what it really was doing is it was putting pressure on our friction to deploy, and it was forcing teams to solve problems that got in the way of their ability to deploy. And so again, all we did was use a Google Sheet. There was nothing fancy about this. But these two pressures of demo things and increase the number of deployments had a really powerful effect on how much we were delivering over time. And then the last thing that we did, again, this is hardly earth-shaking, but it was still a lot of fun, was we started doing hackathons. So like I said, we put this in place where the first week of every fourth suite is a hackathon. So 3 weeks out of 4, the first week is squad-driven. If you sort of think about this, most of the times for the company, 3 weeks, whatever it would be, in essence, 3 months, I can't do that. But a certain number of suites would be for the squad and what they thought they needed to do. But we also wanted to allow people to just be creative. And so we created, we started doing hackathons. When we did this, we intentionally created several categories of awards. There's no monetary awards to this. Worst thing possibly with monetary awards for this kind of thing. But we did create awards. The awards, these are now highly promised awards. They're loading unicorns and narwhals. They're now the things people treasure above everything else. But we created 3 categories with nerdy pictures. That looks like it might have been me, but it's actually not me. So one was an actual thing that has a real chance of becoming part of the product, so low-hanging fruit. Certain people want to deliver real stuff in a hackathon. But other people don't, and we also want to celebrate that. And so one of the things we wanted to incentivize was research, things that actually wouldn't be finished, but would help us learn. Like, everybody's been talking about framework food for JavaScript as the best thing in the entire universe. It will solve all of our problems. If we actually had a little bit of time to research, we might realize that framework food sucks. We don't actually want to do that. And that's failing something like that is learning, and that's valuable. And then the last thing is just neat stuff, weird stuff, totally off-the-wall, experimental, unlikely to do anything practical ever, but it's great and fun, and people love it. So we really felt like if we just said we're going to do a hackathon, the people who are inclined towards deliverable things would probably tend to win and put pressure on other people to make this less fun than it should have been. And so we tried to intentionally put pressure to another direction. So, how's it gone? This is actually, I need to update this. By now, we have a year of basically hit our roadmap goals, every suite for every team the entire time. We have significantly higher product quality, which I would measure by alerts and downtime of product, or outages, which usually customers never saw, but we felt them like crazy. Significantly less rework, much higher morale within the squads. The sweep cycle by now has become really automatic. And like I said, at first this was something we just did within the product teams, but over time the salespeople said, oh, that's you software developers, people who do your Agile things. We're salespeople, this doesn't apply. They now do it, our marketing people do it. It's become a unit of measure, it's become a way of communicating. And one of the biggest benefits for me personally as a leader is it has effectively delegated a lot of the running of the organization to the teams. The teams genuinely are pretty autonomous within a framework that we can measure and manage to. And that means, basically, before we were doing this, I was having to spend a lot of time actually in the teams solving problems. Within about 3 months, I was just sitting in meetings with the managers of the teams, and they were talking about what they were doing. Now I'm actually stepped up another level where I'm managing the VPs who are managing the managers, but stuff still keeps going. So this has been hugely beneficial, I think, for the team, for the organization, and for our ability to make operations something that I wouldn't say just happens, there's still lots of improvements, but something that's very predictable and I can rely on so I can do my This is, I won't promise that everything's perfect, but it really has moved us from, the battling elephant seals to, a team that's rowing together and moving through. With that, that's all of my spiel. I'll be very happy to answer questions. If you have questions, then just all in the silence. It's so amazing. Yes.
Three questions from the audience. We will take 3 questions and then we will move to the feedbacks. And we will contribute the questions. I was wondering if you have any suggestions or tips for people, not at the executive level, but more at maybe a team member or a team manager level, for any ways to kind of implement some of those ideas at kind of more local level within teams?
I think the biggest thing that you can do maybe is strongly counsel not to look at this as like going to implement the John model. This is not safe. Not that I have anything against safe per se. There's sometimes frameworks can be useful. These cadences make sense for us because we are a quarterly driven SaaS company. So that sort of cadence makes sense. I have a friend of mine who works in government. Managing to the election cycle makes way more sense for them. So you really need to understand, and like I said, the FISGOOD model, frequency is what matters to us. So in this, don't look at sort of cargo cult copying practices. Look at which practices meant to accomplish, and sort of see what's the flavor, how does that play out in our organization, and be willing to change. So if you think about that, a fair number of those things, there was sort of attempt 1, attempt 2, attempt 3 before we got it right, or I don't even say the right definition. So keep changing. So we, as we started getting going with this, we created a boot camp program where before, as we were hiring developers or any technical people, and really actually, it started, it was just going to be technical people, but in the end, we put all of our sales and marketing and other people through it. So before anybody could start their job, they had to do a little boot camp where we talked to them about Lean and Kanban and our product and values and all those things. And basically said, if they started working before that, they would never get back to it. People will say they were busy. And so that was sort of my rule, at the leadership level was, I let you hire this person,